Tonight, the United States government has done something that only a few years ago would have sounded impossible. A real disclosure portal now exists, a government-branded UFO archive, a dedicated release system, official domains, declassified files, images, videos, incident reports, and language that sounds less like ordinary bureaucracy and more like the opening phase of something much larger. But here's the question nobody seems able to answer. What exactly is this? Is this genuine transparency, a controlled intelligence operation, a psychological acclimatization campaign, or the beginning of the most significant information release in modern history? Because when you step back and stop focusing only on whether any single file proves aliens, the real story becomes something far stranger. The government hasn't simply released UFO material, it has constructed an entire UFO disclosure architecture. And tonight, we're going deep into what that actually means. Welcome to UFO to UAP, the Disclosure Report. I am Matt Tones, your host, and tonight we investigate the emerging UFO disclosure infrastructure now appearing across government-linked systems, military narratives, public archive releases, and media channels connected to the May 2026 disclosure rollout. We'll examine the strange structure of the release portal, the hidden architecture behind the archive system, why the release process resembles intelligence staging, what the PDFs, images, and videos actually reveal, why online investigators believe more files may exist beneath the public layer, and why the government may be preparing the public for a much larger long-term disclosure strategy. Because this story is no longer just about UFOs, it's about information control itself. For decades, UFO disclosure was treated like fantasy, something always coming soon, always promised, never arriving. Every few years, leaked documents, blurry military footage, whistleblower interviews, congressional statements, classified rumors, and every time the same cycle repeated. Excitement, speculation, then ambiguity. But May 2026 feels different, not necessarily because of what has been revealed, but because of how it is being revealed. That distinction matters enormously, because for the first time, we're not simply seeing leaked files, we're seeing an organized release mechanism, a system, a branded structure, an official pipeline. That changes the psychology completely. This is no longer someone leaks something. This is the government built a framework for releasing UFO information. And once that framework exists, everything changes. When investigators first began exploring the new UFO disclosure site, many expected a simple archive page, maybe a few PDFs, some scanned documents, basic government formatting. Instead, the portal looked strangely modern, almost cinematic. It included interactive interfaces, image viewers, release categories, media integration, navigation systems, modal windows, archival style layouts, embedded content structures, and immediately online researchers noticed something unusual. The site appeared larger than the publicly visible content. People began finding references to hidden assets, image paths, unreleased media, placeholder structures, non-indexed directories, inactive archive references. And suddenly, the internet started behaving exactly the way disclosure architects would expect. Crowdsourced investigation exploded. People started digging, searching, mapping directories, looking for hidden releases. And whether intentional or not, the system itself became part of the story. That's important because modern information systems are not passive, they are designed experiences. And this portal appears designed to generate anticipation, investigation, speculation, engagement, and viral participation. In other words, the structure itself may be psychologically strategic. Now, let's talk about the wording, because the language used across this rollout is incredibly important. Terms appearing throughout the release architecture include historic undertaking, rolling disclosure, unprecedented transparency, presidential release authority, archive incident materials, public accountability, ongoing releases, unresolved phenomena. This is not accidental wording. Government communication is obsessively engineered. Every phrase is reviewed, every sentence calibrated. And what makes this different is that the language feels intentionally transitional, not case closed, but something is beginning. That creates a fascinating psychological effect. The public starts expecting escalation, future revelations, additional phases, more evidence. And once expectation is created, attention becomes permanent. This may be the most important development of all, because the government may not need to reveal extraordinary evidence immediately. It may only need to establish credibility, continuity, expectation, infrastructure. That alone changes public consciousness. Now, this is where things become deeply interesting, because disclosure is no longer a single event. It's becoming a process, and processes can be controlled, paced, managed, narratively guided. Historically, intelligence agencies understood something critical. Large-scale public revelations cannot simply appear overnight, especially if they fundamentally alter trust, geopolitics, religion, science, national security, and historical narratives. Societies destabilize under sudden paradigm shifts. So if disclosure were ever to happen, it would likely occur gradually, incrementally, psychologically. And that's exactly what many researchers believe we may now be witnessing. Not full disclosure, but acclimatization. Acclimatization. Gosh, I said that terribly. A slow normalization campaign. Notice the sequence. Military videos normalize UFO discussion. Congress normalizes hearings. Whistleblowers normalized insider testimony. AARO normalized investigation. Mainstream media normalized coverage. Now, archive portals normalize government transparency. Each stage reduces stigma. Each stage moves the public slightly further until eventually the idea itself no longer feels impossible. That may be the real operation here. Now, let's discuss one of the strangest aspects of the release, the so-called 17 pages. Many users exploring the portal reported references to multiple pages, hidden navigation systems, asset directories, inaccessible media, content layers beyond the visible archive. Some believe additional files are waiting to activate. Others think the site structure references future releases not yet public. And some researchers argue the entire architecture may have been intentionally designed to encourage digital exploration. That matters because mystery drives engagement, and engagement drives amplification. If people believe there may be more hidden beneath the surface, they keep searching, they keep talking, they keep posting. The disclosure narrative sustains itself. And whether intentional or not, that's exactly what has happened. Social media exploded with archive analysis, hidden file hunts, source code inspection, metadata speculation, image enhancement attempts, timeline theories. The disclosure system became interactive, and that may be unprecedented. Now, here's the critical reality check. Despite the enormous excitement, there is still no publicly released file that conclusively proves extraterrestrial visitation. That's important because emotionally, many people want the release to be definitive, but analytically, the evidence remains ambiguous. What we mostly see are incident summaries, radar references, pilot testimony, anomalous observations, military reporting language, tracking anomalies, unresolved aerial encounters. That alone is still historically significant, but it is not yet proof of aliens. And honestly, that ambiguity may be deliberate because ambiguity keeps the conversation alive. Absolute proof ends debate, but unresolved mystery creates endless engagement. That's why the structure itself may matter more than any single document. The government may not yet be trying to convince the public of extraterrestrials. It may simply be normalizing there are genuine, unexplained phenomena. That distinction changes everything. For decades, UFO culture existed outside institutions. Now, institutions themselves are participating. That's the difference. Congress talks about UAPs. Military pilots discuss encounters publicly. Defense officials acknowledge unknown objects. Intelligence figures discuss retrieval rumors. And now, government linked disclosure architecture exists online. That cumulative effect is psychologically enormous because humans trust patterns. And when multiple institutions slowly align around a topic, public perception changes permanently, even without definitive evidence. The phenomenon becomes socially real. And when something becomes socially real, it begins reshaping culture itself. There's another possibility here, one rarely discussed. What if the disclosure architecture isn't actually about aliens at all? What if the objective is institutional trust rebuilding, strategic ambiguity, adversarial signaling, advanced aerospace masking, psychological operations, or information dominance? Remember, UFO narratives have enormous geopolitical utility. They create uncertainty, fascination, fear, distraction, technological mystique. And historically, states have always understood the power of mystery. So the real question may not be, are aliens real? But why are governments choosing this moment to build public UFO disclosure systems? That question may ultimately matter more. Now we go deeper into the intelligence psychology behind controlled disclosure, the role of social media amplification, whether disclosure is becoming a permanent information ecosystem, how UFO narratives now intersect with politics, technology, and national security, and why the modern disclosure era may fundamentally change public consciousness even without definitive proof. Let's assume for a moment that this disclosure process is intentional, not accidental, not chaotic, but strategically designed. If it were true, what would it actually look like? Ironically, probably exactly like this, because intelligence operations rarely work through sudden revelation. They work through conditioning, pacing, repetition, emotional normalization, narrative shaping. You introduce an idea slowly, you reduce stigma gradually, you let the public acclimatize over time, and eventually the once unthinkable becomes ordinary. That's one reason this modern disclosure era feels so different from earlier decades, because earlier UFO waves were chaotic. Now everything feels coordinated, not necessarily coordinated by one single organization, but by converging institutional forces, congressional hearings, Pentagon statements, whistleblower testimony, archive systems, media coverage, academic discussion, all moving together. That creates a very different psychological environment. One of the strangest things about the UFO phenomena is that it never disappears, even after ridicule, even after debunking waves, even after public skepticism. The topic always returns. Why? Because unresolved mystery is psychologically irresistible, especially when tied to national security, secret technology, hidden knowledge, existential questions, government secrecy. UFOs sit at the intersection of all of them, and now, for the first time in history, governments themselves are participating in the mythology. That changes everything because once institutions validate the legitimacy of investigation, the conversation permanently evolves. Notice the shift in terminology. For decades, UFO, now UAPs. That change wasn't cosmetic, it was strategic. UFO carried cultural baggage, science fiction, conspiracy culture, ridicule. UAP sounds technical, scientific, military, institutional. The terminology reframed the phenomena in itself, and that reframing opened the door for mainstream legitimacy. Now, let's discuss the real engine behind modern disclosure. Not government, not the military, not intelligence agencies, social media. Because disclosure today no longer operates through newspapers or television alone. It moves through TikTok, X or Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, Discord, live stream analysis, AI enhanced image breakdowns, viral speculation cycles. And that changes the rules entirely. Information no longer moves top down, it moves horizontally. Millions of people become investigators simultaneously. The moment the portal launched, the internet immediately began dissecting everything. People analyzed source code, metadata, hidden file paths, image compression, timestamps, government domain registrations, and archive inconsistencies. The crowd became part of the disclosure process. That may be historically unprecedented, and governments understand this, which means the release architecture itself may have been designed knowing the public would behave this way. That's a crucial point because in modern information warfare, participation creates investment. If the public helps discover the narrative, they emotionally own the narrative. There's another important concept here: controlled uncertainty. The files released so far are fascinating, but incomplete, suggestive, but inconclusive. That creates a perfect psychological state. People remain engaged because they believe answers may still come. The mystery remains unresolved. Future releases feel possible. That's powerful. And intelligence systems have historically understood something critical. People become obsessed not with certainty, but with unresolved patterns. That's why conspiracy ecosystems become self sustaining. The uncertainty itself fuels attention. And the current disclosure system may unintentionally or intentionally operate exactly this way. Every release generates new questions, new theories, new investigations, new debates, meaning the narrative never stabilizes. It continuously evolves. Now, here's the uncomfortable question: has disclosure become entertainment? Because the modern UFO ecosystem now contains podcasts like this one, documentaries, influencers, monetized channels, reaction videos, live streams, premium content, viral clips, and importantly, governments understand media ecosystems extremely well. Modern information campaigns do not operate separately from entertainment, they merge with it. And UFOs are uniquely powerful because they trigger awe, fear, curiosity, existential wonder. Very few topics generate that emotional combination, which makes UFO disclosure one of the most powerful narrative engines imaginable. The challenge becomes, how do you separate genuine investigation from narrative amplification? That line is becoming increasingly difficult to identify. Another possibility cannot be ignored. What if at least part of this disclosure movement concerns advanced terrestrial technology? Because historically, classified aerospace programs have often appeared alien, decades before public disclosure. Stealth aircraft once looked impossible. Hypersonic systems once sounded absurd. Advanced drone technology once seemed futuristic. So some analysts argue the UFO narrative may partially function as a masking layer for classified technological development. And if true, that creates fascinating strategic advantages because ambiguity itself becomes protection. Adversaries remain uncertain. The public remains distracted. Capabilities remain obscured. Now, that does not explain every UFO report, but it may explain why governments tolerate certain narratives, sometimes even encourage them indirectly. because uncertainty can itself be strategically useful. Now, we enter dangerous territory because disclosure doesn't just affect politics, it affects worldview itself. If humanity were ever presented with undeniable evidence of non-human intelligence, the consequences would be enormous, not just scientifically, spiritually, philosophically, civilizationally. Questions immediately emerge. What are humans? Are religions incomplete? Were ancient encounters misunderstood? Does consciousness extend beyond current models? Are we alone? Have we ever been alone? And perhaps most importantly, how would billions of people psychologically process that realization? That's why some researchers argue disclosure, if real, could never occur instantly. The implications would be too destabilizing, so gradual normalization becomes essential. And again, that's exactly what many believe we are now witnessing. Whether one believes in extraterrestrials or not, something undeniable has changed. The UFO topic has crossed a threshold. It is now permanently embedded inside government discussion, defense analysis, public consciousness, media ecosystems, online culture, political discourse. That alone is historically extraordinary because 20 years ago, serious public discussions of UFOs could destroy careers. Today, senators discuss UAPs openly. Military pilots testify publicly. Major newspapers cover disclosure seriously. And governments build archive systems around the phenomenon. That is not normal. Something fundamental has shifted. Now, here's the question everyone is asking. What happens next? Will additional files appear? More videos? Better imagery? Whistleblower confirmations? Recovery program evidence? Or does the process stall here? Nobody knows, but the structure suggests continuation because the portal itself feels expandable, almost modular, like phase one. And if that's true, future releases may not simply be random disclosures, they may follow a carefully placed escalation model. If so, this may not be the end of disclosure, it may be just the beginning. Ultimately, the biggest mystery may not be what are UFOs, but why are governments changing their behavior around UFOs? That question matters enormously because even without definitive evidence, institutional behavior itself tells a story. Governments do not accidentally normalize topics, build infrastructure, change language, coordinate messaging, release archives, and encourage investigation. Those decisions happen deliberately, and whatever the ultimate explanation may be, we are clearly entering a new phase of the phenomena, a phase where UFOs are no longer confined to conspiracy culture, but are becoming integrated into official reality itself. Tonight, we explored more than just files. We explored the architecture of modern disclosure itself. And maybe that's the true revelation. Not a single video, not a single image, not a single leaked document, but the realization that governments are now constructing systems designed to keep the UFO question permanently alive. And once that happens, the world changes forever because disclosure is no longer hypothetical, it's operational. This is UFO to UAP, the Disclosure Report. I am Matt Tones, and I'll see you in the next file. If you'd like to have a look at the release, go to war.gov/UFO/. Let me know your thoughts.